Hello and welcome. Tonight, we investigate a mystery that is uniquely modern and deeply unsettling. It is a cautionary tale for the age of digital footprints, a story where the primary witnesses to a tragedy were the victim's own electronic devices. We follow two young women on a dream trip that descended into a nightmare, leaving behind a series of baffling clues that have tormented investigators and online sleuths for years. This is the definitive deep dive into the lost in Panama, the chilling photos and unsolved mystery of Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon. In the spring of 2014, Kris Kremers, 21, and Lisanne Froon, 22, were on top of the world. Two bright, vibrant, and sensible young women from the Netherlands. They had just graduated from university and decided to celebrate with a 6-week trip to Panama. It was a reward for their hard work, a chance to learn Spanish, volunteer with local children, and experience a new culture. They were excited and well prepared. On March 29th, they arrived in the picturesque mountain town of Boquete, famous for its coffee plantations and beautiful hiking trails. On the morning of April 1st, 2014, the two women decided to take a hike. They chose the popular and well-regarded El Pianista Trail, a path that winds up into the cloud forests of the Talamanca Range. It was a relatively short, out-and-back trail. Their plan was to hike for a few hours with a local guide's dog and be back in town for their Spanish lesson that afternoon. They dressed lightly, carrying only a small backpack with their phones, a camera, some water, and a little cash. Photos taken that morning show them smiling, happy, and ready for a small adventure. It was the last time anyone would see them alive. When they failed to show up for their lesson, their host family grew concerned. The next morning, when they were still missing, the alarm was raised. An extensive search was launched involving Panamanian authorities, local guides, and later Dutch investigators with sniffer dogs. They scoured the El Pianista Trail and the surrounding jungle. They found nothing. For 10 weeks, it was as if the two women had vanished from the face of the earth. Then, on June 14th, a local woman who worked in the rice paddies along the banks of the Culebra River, miles away from Boquete and deep in the jungle, found something. It was a blue backpack. It was Lisanne Froon's. Inside, perfectly dry and in remarkably good condition, were two pairs of sunglasses, two bras, a water bottle, Lisanne's passport, some cash, her camera, and both of their cell phones. The discovery of the backpack was a monumental breakthrough. It didn't tell investigators where the women were, but it contained a digital black box, a chilling second-by-second chronicle of their final desperate days. The first thing investigators examined were the phones. The call logs revealed a timeline of desperation. On the afternoon of April 1st, just a few hours after they started their hike, the first emergency calls were made. At 4:39 p.m., a call was placed from Kris's iPhone to 112, the international emergency number. 20 minutes later, at 4:51 p.m., another call was placed from Lisanne's Samsung Galaxy. Both calls failed to connect due to a lack of reception in the dense jungle. This was the moment their adventure turned into a crisis. They knew they were lost. Over the next 10 days, the phones logged a heartbreaking series of 77 more attempts to call for help. The logs show a pattern of methodical survival. The women would turn their phones on for brief periods to check for a signal and then turn them off to conserve battery. The attempts continued day after day. On April 5th, Lisanne's phone battery finally died. Kris's iPhone, however, held on. But on April 7th, a strange entry appears in the log. Between 10:50 a.m. and 1:56 p.m., there are multiple failed attempts to unlock the phone using an incorrect PIN number. Was it Kris in a state of delirium, forgetting her code? Or was it someone else trying to access her phone? The final attempt to check for a signal was made on April 11th at 10:53 a.m. After that, the phone was never turned on again. The digital calls for help fell silent. If the phone logs were a chronicle of desperation, the contents of the camera were a glimpse into pure horror. The camera, a Canon PowerShot, contained over 100 photos. The first set, taken on April 1st, were exactly what you'd expect. They were happy pictures of the two women smiling at the trailhead, posing at the scenic overlook at the top of the trail. Everything seemed normal. But the photos also showed that they had continued past the overlook, leaving the marked trail and venturing deeper into the uncharted jungle. The last daytime photograph, numbered 508, was taken at 2:54 p.m. and shows Kris Kremers crossing a shallow stream, looking back towards the camera. Then there is a gap of a full week. The next photos were taken in the dead of night, on the morning of April 8th. Between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m., the camera's flash was fired over 90 times. The vast majority of these photos are completely black, showing nothing. But the handful that are in focus are bizarre and deeply unsettling. One photo shows a close-up of a twig with a piece of red plastic bag tied to it, placed on a large rock. Another shows a pile of dirt with a candy wrapper on it. Another shows what appears to be a makeshift trail marker made of toilet paper on a rock. One of the most disturbing images is a close-up of the back of Kris Kremers' head, showing her distinctive reddish hair. Her temple appears to have a small amount of blood on it. What were these photos? The most benign explanation is that the women were using the camera's flash as a makeshift flashlight to see in the pitch-black jungle, or perhaps as a signal, hoping to attract rescuers. But this doesn't feel right. The photos are not random flashes. Many seem to be deliberately composed, aimed at specific objects. Were they trying to document something, leaving clues? Or were they taking pictures of something or someone that was in the darkness with them, just beyond the reach of the flash? The image of Kris's hair is particularly chilling. Why take such a photo? Was she injured or already deceased at this point? And was Lisanne documenting it? The night photos are a Rorschach test of terror, and their true purpose is the heart of the Amityville mystery. The discovery of the backpack and its digital content spurred a new, more targeted search along the Culebra River. What they found confirmed their worst fears. A few weeks later, Lisanne's hiking boot was found, with her severed foot and ankle bones still inside. Further upriver, Kris's denim shorts were found, neatly folded and placed on a rock. Soon after, more bone fragments were discovered scattered along the riverbank, including Kris's pelvic bone, which had been strangely bleached. In total, only a handful of bone fragments from the two women were ever recovered. The official conclusion of the Dutch and Panamanian authorities was that the women had tragically died in a hiking accident. The lost and perished theory posits that they wandered off the trail, became lost, and one of them, likely Kris, suffered a serious fall and was incapacitated. Lisanne, the more resilient one, stayed with her friend, trying to signal for help. After over a week, they succumbed to the elements, starvation, or their injuries. Their remains were then washed downriver during the rainy season and scattered by animal scavengers, explaining the state of the bones. It is a plausible, heartbreaking scenario. But for many, including the Kremers family, this theory leaves too many questions unanswered. This is the foul play theory. Why was photo number 509, the one taken directly after the last known photo of Kris, deleted from the camera? It's the only photo that was deliberately erased. Why was Kris's phone locked with a failed PIN code days after she was likely incapacitated? Why were her shorts found neatly folded, a detail that seems incongruous with a chaotic accident scene? The area is known to be used by local guides for under-the-table tours, and there are also reports of cartel activity and organ trafficking in the region. The foul play theory suggests that the women encountered a third party in the jungle who abducted and murdered them. This person, or persons, then held them captive for a week, explaining the 10 days of phone calls, before killing them and scattering their belongings and remains to make it look like an accident. The bizarre night photos could have been taken by the killer as a form of taunting, or to create a false trail. The case of Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon is a modern nightmare. A story where the digital breadcrumbs left behind only led to more darkness. Their phones and camera tell a story, but it is a story that can be read in two completely different ways. It is either a heartbreaking chronicle of two brave women fighting for survival against the unforgiving jungle, or it is the sinister, manipulated final act of a murder mystery. The infamous night photographs are a window into their final hours, but what they show us is a reflection of our own deepest fears of the unknown. The Panamanian jungle holds the truth of what happened, but it is a dark and silent secret it may never give up.